We're going to go live today with Brooklyn Decker, which I'm so excited about. And we're going to talk about all of the amazing work that she's doing with It's Bodily. And we had the founder, Tova, on earlier this year. So I'm really excited to have it all come full circle and talk to Brooklyn about it and all of the really cool work that she's doing again with Brooklyn going live. Just to talk about pregnancy, postpartum. Yay!
We're here.
We're here. We did it.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I am so well. How are you?
I'm so great. I'm so excited about all this amazing work that you're doing that I'm like, and she's posing in her bra and undies that look so comfy and amazing. And she looks
Thank you.
flawless.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this. And it was funny because when I saw that you were doing work with It's Bodily, we had Tova on earlier this year to talk about It's Bodily, and I had some of her breastfeeding bras because I was still breastfeeding, and they're the best ever.
They really are. They really are.
Yeah, and we talked just about like all of the unknown, which I know you're really, vocal about, that comes from, not having a great fitting bra, especially when you're breastfeeding, and getting all the things like mastitis, and just like the awareness around that I always felt very unprepared for. So I know that I'm so grateful that you're talking about all of this and working with them, because I thought that it was such a great idea and brand.
Well, thank you for continuing to do work in this space and trying to highlight what this transition really looks like, because I think, like you said, I too was completely unprepared, and I had the most sort of normal of pregnancies and deliveries, and I had wonderful care in the hospital. My mom's a nurse, and even despite all of that, I still felt woefully unprepared for what recovery looked like. So thank you for continuing in your efforts to shine a light on what this whole phase of motherhood really looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it's really crazy. And you have 2 kids, so you've done it twice. And I know that you have posted pictures just about like postpartum life in general, but when you decided to be really open about pregnancy, postpartum, and just to be a voice in this space, was there something that kind of sparked you to do that? Because it's not like it's a glamorous thing to talk about.
It's not. And Katherine, embarrassingly enough, so I did this collaboration with Bodily. I'm an investor and love their mission. And as part of that, and this is, I tend to just verbally, vomit information. It's too much. But I did this podcast with people, and I ended up talking about hemorrhoids, postpartum. And I'm like,
I saw.
And I'm doing it here again. I'm like, why am I talking about hemorrhoids? Why am I doing this? But when you ask what started it, it was totally organic. So I had a very normal pregnancy. I was very lucky to have a pretty standard birth. I had stitches and all of that, normal sort of hiccups, but nothing that was extraordinary as far as circumstances are concerned. And it was still the most shocking part of my transition to motherhood. And as a result, I started making these homemade kits for friends. I was like, okay, this is the cream you need. This is the spray you need.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to wipe for 6 weeks after. Here are all the gory goodies one needs. And
right.
I had sent a kit to a friend of mine, and her husband is a founder and an investor. And he happened to be at a dinner with Tova, the founder of Bodily, who was talking about this idea for a company that she had. And so he connected the 2 of us. And so really, Tova met me. We had kids our first children around the same time, and we both had a very similar experience, which I think most women have in this phase, which is shocking in its best state. Yeah. And we started sending each other bras and creams and gels and pads and all sorts of stuff. And I became so involved that I put my money into her idea and invested in her as an entrepreneur, and in this idea that this area of women's health is really underserved, and the company's grown, and so it's just, I believe in her, I believe in the mission, and it really started in the most organic of ways, which was I really needed it, and so I thought my friends really needed it, and I met Tova at the right time when she was starting this company.
Yeah, I mean, I always think that for those of us who have other girlfriends who have gone through the whole birth experience. I always feel like everybody gives you advice when you're pregnant or how to get pregnant. And, you know, when you first become pregnant or find out you're pregnant, you know, what, you know, oils to use on your tummy or, you know, different things to wear or that help with nausea. But then I also felt like when I came home from the hospital, I had one of my girlfriends who gave me like a brief warning of, you know, how you'll still look 5 months pregnant and you're going to need these things called padsicles. But I had a bunch of my girlfriends who had babies very quickly after me, and we made these little kits, and they were so helpful because what the hospital kind of sends you home with is not, I had like a one sheet
Yes.
that me home with, and I was just like, well, you know, and then the hormone come down. There's like a lot of different factors. And that's why I loved your picture, because it was like so typical of exactly like what I experienced a little over a year ago of being completely, and I also felt like I was like, Mom, you didn't want to tell me any of this? Like, okay.
Yes.
It was wild.
And I think people forget, you know, I think there's a level of, you know, I talk to friends of mine, and a lot of my friends say like, listen, I don't want to know how hard it is because I want this to be a positive experience and I don't want to be really scared. My take on it is, we'll all be like, this doesn't have to be scary. It's simply the reality of childbirth and this transition into motherhood. And if we are well equipped with support, products, information, it'll make that transition so much easier. I think there's so much focus on the newborn, which is obviously incredibly important, but once there's a baby, we neglect the mother's health. And I think, you know, the United States, the average maternity leave is 10 days. Women go back to work after 10 days. I went back to work after 3 weeks. And when you go back, you're not in your right mind. I mean, it's one, I think we need to give more support to mothers in that sense. But two, if women choose to do that, to go back early, let's give them the support they need to be able to really manage that. And them managing that transition will allow them to be better partners and better mothers and allow for better care of the newborn. And
it's so true. And it's so important. What have been kind of like the biggest feedbacks or interactions that you've had since you've chose to be so open about whether it's postpartum, pregnancy, hemorrhoids, all of it? Like, what has been the biggest feedback that you've gotten just from either other moms or just people who haven't had kids yet? Because the questions that we got for you were really cool, kind of like across the board of, you know, people who are postpartum, pregnant, and, you know, pre-pregnancy. But I'm sure there have been a lot of interesting things that you've heard just from people's feedback on social media.
The most surprising thing to me is, and I see this a lot, is when women will say, oh my goodness, I went through this experience of a very hard recovery, or I had a really scary health issue after I left the hospital, or I dealt with loss. And I've never shared this with anyone other than my partner. And now I feel like I can share this with other women. And what has surprised me is how for whatever reason, how women really operate in a silo when they're going through this transition into like trying to get pregnant, getting pregnant, having a child, losing a child. We really operate in isolation. You know, these stories aren't openly shared. And I don't know if that's a Western culture thing. I don't know if that's a 2021 thing. I'm not quite sure, but it really surprised me how women are fighting these really big battles in solitude. And so I'm always so inspired and encouraged by the rawness and the openness. The second that you share, yeah, I had a second degree tear and 8 stitches, and it was really hard, and I couldn't use toilet paper for 6 weeks. All of a sudden women are like, oh my gosh, I've never told anyone, but that was my experience too. And this is what I used, and this is what helped me. And that community has been both comforting, surprising, saddening, because you think of, you know, if we all just shared more of this with each other, it might make this process so much easier. And, you know, I think the care is there, the education is there. It's just that we aren't openly sharing it. We aren't openly giving access to it. So that really has been the most surprising thing is how unifying, and I think now more than ever, we want these unifying things, right? That how unifying this experience is for women if we just share.
Why do you think that it is that we don't share? Because I've always been so fascinated, I think, especially since like when I first got pregnant with my daughter, just hearing different stories from a lot of my girlfriends, or if I had a girlfriend who experienced loss, having another girlfriend surprisingly say like, oh, that also happened to me. And then, so there's the loss aspect of it. And then there's also just like the whole pregnancy journey, becoming a new parent, and all the things that come with postpartum life, which is, you know, I think it's obviously an incredibly beautiful and amazing time. And you're also dealing with hormones, sleep deprivation, you know, obviously like postpartum care of your own body. Why I just, it, to me, it's always interesting as to why like there are so many of us who experienced it, but we are still so reluctant to be so open about it, like you are.
That's interesting. You know, I don't have a good answer for that, but what I think, and I've put a lot of thought into this, is that for whatever reason, our culture puts so much value in bouncing back or getting back to work or getting your sexy back or like whatever that thing is. I think our culture puts so much emphasis on getting your sexuality back, getting your professional life back, getting your social life back, getting your body back. And what that does is it fails to recognize the fact that we're not the same people we were before we had children. For me, it changed me on a cellular level. My priorities changed, my focus changed, my physical body changed, everything changed. And I think if we gave women, for example, when they deal with pregnancy loss, if we gave women, if we acknowledged like, listen, take the leave you need at work to process this and to physically recover from it, to heal from it. I think if we created these support systems for women to transition into what is just a new reality, not that your old life is gone, it's not that, it's just that there is a new reality. And I think for whatever reason, our culture doesn't recognize that and certainly doesn't support the transition into the new reality. And I think if we did, we would so openly talk about it. We would so openly talk about our needs if they were respected in the workplace. We would so openly talk about our needs, you know, in the hospital, and they would be respected by the healthcare community. And I just think culturally we're not there yet. And I think that's why, you know, these conversations are super helpful. What you do every week is super helpful. What Bodily is doing is part of the change. And I think we just need more women sharing in that. And frankly, partners of these people who choose to mother saying like, yeah, I saw my partner go through this and there does need to be more support in place.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I want to also talk, because I know that Bodily does, of course, the breastfeeding bras that we've talked about, and care packages, but just what they do, because they're so much more than that. They're really an online resource as well. And just a resource for women in various different phases that you don't have to be necessarily pregnant to be somebody to be interested in Bodily. So will you tell us a little bit about that, just so people understand kind of like the full big picture of it?
Yes. I don't know about you, but when I was postpartum and getting pregnant and going through my pregnancy, my source of information truly was like deep message board threads. You know, I was going like 9 pages deep on like a baby center thread, which is fine, right? It creates a sense of community, but you're like, okay, this person is saying this and this person's saying that, and this is someone else's experience, and none of it is actually like research backed, you know, like there's no, I don't know if any of these people are actual healthcare professionals. And so what Bodily, one of their missions was to create research-backed information for people who choose to parent. And so there's information on hormone imbalances and how that affects trying to get pregnant, how that affects going into menopause, how that affects just different phases of a woman's life and body, information around mastitis and wearing the right bra, and information around conception. And it's all backed by medical professionals. And I think there's, for whatever reason, a huge void there. And I think what that does is it creates both community that's based on real information, but also provides the product support that one needs to support themselves. You know, I was breastfeeding my son and he was 8 months old, and I thought, oh, I'm in the clear for mastitis. I have an 8-month-old. Like I'm out of that sort of new breastfeeding stage. And I was on set working and I got 102.7 fever, and it got up to 104. And I looked and I had this streaking on my breast, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's because I was wearing, you know, I was on set, I was wearing like Spanx and underwire, and it was horrible. And I had no idea that there was such a simple solution to what can be a pretty severe problem. And so Bodily really has a wealth of information for women at all stages of their fertility life, their just women's health life, their transition out of their fertile stage, that is backed by real medical research.
Yeah, I mean, the whole hormone world is also so tricky and so confusing, I think, for like all different phases of a woman's life. And like my mom has been super vocal with me just about the importance of getting like baseline hormone levels for yourself. But it is I mean, not only after when you're pregnant, your hormones go crazy and they're like seem to be happier for the most part, but then like afterwards, I mean, it's just like a total roller coaster. And then obviously as you get older, your hormones change even more. So I think any information on hormones or just really all those subjects is so important and necessary to get to people that are in all different phases of life, because it's
Totally.
a wild ride.
And also, like, you know, it's funny. I live in the South, and so I think that we as Southerners are sort of a little bit more hesitant to talk openly about a lot of this stuff. And someone I know, a mom at my child's school, recently had a baby, and this is probably going to be too much on this chat, but I said, everyone's asking like, how's the baby and how are they sleeping? And I was like, how is your vagina? How are your breasts? How are you doing? And it was such a like a, oh, she said it, she said the V word. It was such a like a jarring moment for people. And I said, what? If someone got a knee surgery, you would ask them how their knee is feeling. Like,
Yeah.
this is, let's talk about this. And, you know, I think, as you said, like it's really wonderful. You have a mom who talks to you about all of these phases of womanhood. I think that for so many of us, we're taught that it's private information. And I'm kind of the belief, like, this is not private information. This is public information, because the more I know, the more you're prepared, the more my partner can be prepared to support me in these transitions. So I think that, yes, like you said, you having just someone to talk to you about it has helped so much. And I think if more of us are doing that, one, it's really funny. Like, these changes are just funny. Talking about all of this stuff, it just is. Like, the body is a funny thing, and weird things happen. And at the very least, it can make us laugh, you know, because we can share this experience with each other. So, yeah, my thing is I'm probably candid to a fault, but I'm like, let's share it all.
I think it's so important. Was there like something that for you, aside from the mastitis experience or just maybe your breastfeeding journey in general, that was like the most shocking thing for you postpartum?
So I had a lot of clotting after I gave birth, which I think when you're in the hospital is very scary. And my nurse told me, she said, listen, as long as they don't get bigger than a golf ball, you're fine. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds very scary, but that little bit of information gave me so much comfort and support when I went home, just to have like a barometer for what I should be looking for. And at what point I knew I should call, you know, a specialist about this or a doctor about this. And that to me was so surprising, because I knew that the body took a while to come back or get back to whatever the new normal is. But I didn't think about these really scary sort of health ramifications that would come after, that again, were totally normal. Like, that seeing a bunch of clots was not an abnormal reaction to delivery. It was completely normal. But yeah, there was a lot that was very shocking. You know, I think we're given this narrative that like, I remember thinking this and people telling me this, like, women have done this for centuries. Women have breastfed for centuries. Therefore, you should be able to too, but it's simply just not the case. It's like, yeah, but women died and continue to die during childbirth. And breastfeeding continues to be incredibly challenging for a lot of us. And so again, I think we put this blanket idea that it's all supposed to be natural because childbirth is natural. And it's sure our bodies can do it, but it's certainly not without huge challenges and huge health risks.
I mean, speaking of just the importance of maternal health, the awareness of maternal health, maternal mortality, obviously being a really big issue here in America. I want to talk, because I know I mentioned your beautiful underwear pictures, but there's obviously something that people can be buying there, but also it goes to benefiting an amazing organization as well. So will you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's, I think, something that I feel like unfortunately, we are hearing more of these kind of scary situations that women are going through either in labor or postpartum. Um, and I don't know if that's with people being sent home faster because of COVID times, or just, again, a lack of awareness or, you know, care for women. But I think it's a really great organization, and of course a cause to be shining a light on.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So a portion of the sales from my collaboration with Bodily go to For Cure for Moms, which is an organization that is meant to support both victims of maternal loss, so families who lose a mother after she delivers a child, and also go towards legislation to support more women in their maternal health journeys. The founder very devastatingly lost his wife in the hospital after she delivered their second child. And he made it his mission to find justice for both her and other families who have dealt with maternal loss. He actually posted today about a woman who just passed away in the hospital. She had just delivered, and people assumed that the postpartum complications she was having were normal, and they were far from normal. And for many reasons, the United States falls last in first world countries as far as maternal mortality, when we shouldn't. We have obviously unbelievable healthcare here. That should not be an issue that our country is facing. We should be helping other countries tackle this issue. And obviously that problem is even greater, even bigger and scarier for women of color. And that goes back generations of how we perceive women of color and strength and all of that. So it's a huge problem here in this country. I think it's gotten worse because of COVID. I think people are hesitant to call their doctors. They're not as quick to go in to get checked out. They're not as quick to make that phone call when something is wrong because they're downplaying the issues. But this organization is working really hard to both, support families and change legislation to create more support for women and women's health.
And I mean, it's also frustrating because I feel like this is such a big issue that I know so many women are really passionate about it or want to do something. And of course, supporting what you're doing with It's Bodily and also this organization is a great step to doing that. But I mean, what can people be doing to help, you know, spread awareness about this, get legislation changed, but then also just talk about this subject more? Because I often feel like you see people talk about it and then you say something like that and you're like, of course this is such a big issue and of course this affects so many people, but why isn't this getting more attention or the focus that it should if people are giving birth? Because I think we think like, oh, you give birth, again, women have done it for, you know, forever, and so it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal, of course, and it's, you know, oftentimes doesn't go as planned. Things happen. You know, women can pass away from it. It's just like a very scary thing a lot of the times. And yet we still don't really, you know, there's still obviously a really big gap there with care, information. I mean, I think when you go home from a C-section, you get a packet of information. When you go home from a vaginal delivery, you get a one sheet. Both are not giving you a ton of information. And I've had a lot of friends who will say to me, like, I'm having a lot of pain. Is that normal? And I'm like, you should probably call your doctor. Like, I would love to be able to advise you, but I think there's also, you know, as a lot of women don't want to complain about pain or kind of like this, yeah, you just gave birth, you're supposed to be in pain kind of a thing. So I always wonder, like, what is the kind of thing that people who are watching or will watch later, like, what can people be doing to help with that?
Oh, I think there is a multi-pronged approach. I think one is specifically in healthcare and how it pertains to women's health, and that I am not equipped to talk about because I'm not a healthcare provider, but obviously there's a huge gap there because the statistics prove that's the case. But from a cultural standpoint, again, I think information and communal support is of the utmost importance. I think when you're pregnant, at least now in 2021, I was pregnant in 2017. You know, there were apps to tell you like your baby is the size of a plum, but beyond that, there wasn't much. You really look to your friends and your community for support. And that's why I think finding that information online, it is so readily available. is really important. I think, not to sound super pluggy, but I do think companies like Bodily, who are giving these boxes that say like, here's a kit of all of the stuff you're going to need at home after you give birth. I think that's incredibly important. My goal is to have a Bodily box in every delivery room for women to take home with all sorts of information that they need. I think if you are a founder, or if you are an employer, creating space for women in your office to breastfeed, creating space for them, metaphorical space to take time off if they are experiencing pregnancy loss, and also with coming back to work in maternity leave. I think if you are someone who is in a position to employ people, that's something I would strongly encourage employers to consider. I think there are just so many different places in this country where we can be so much better. Again, there's no family care plan. Yes, there is a 12 weeks family leave that you can take, but it's not paid. So can moms and fathers really afford to do that? There's so much that we can be doing that aren't crazy ideas. Other countries are doing them and doing them well. And it's funny, like this is getting a little bit in the weeds, but we're talking about how women are starting later to have children and how people are choosing to have fewer children because of economically how challenging it is. And you hear these economists freaking out. You know, they're like, the birth rate's dropping for the first time, and what does that mean for the future? And it's like, if our economy really does depend on people having children, then let's support the people who are having children. It's very simple. Like, there are ways to do this. So again, it's a very, I think, complicated problem with several very tangible solutions that, if they just become widely adopted, can make a big difference. It won't fix all of our problems, but will really help to kind of propel us forward into a place where, like, our country as a global leader should be in supporting mothers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like the biggest thing to be doing in this space is to just continue the conversation around it, because it is such an important conversation and important topic to be talking about. I mean, the whole umbrella of just women's health, of course, but also just, you know, pregnancy, postpartum, all the goods that come in that.
All the gory details.
All the gory details. We love them. And I think just being like really open and supportive for people that you know that are pregnant, like you said, going out to a mom and asking how her vagina is, like those are things. I'm sure in the South, that's like the most shocking thing people have heard all year.
I heard squeals from other moms, full on squeals, like, "Wow, she asked it. She asked the problem." But again, like I said, and I said it then, I said, listen, if you got a knee surgery, I would ask you how your knee is doing. You know, right. Yeah. It's a surgery in many cases.
Yeah, no, I think I mean, of course, yeah, it is. And it's also like a crazy transformation that your body goes through on so many different levels. So I love it. I'm going to start asking people that when I know they give birth.
Frankly, like for me, because my recovery was particularly challenging, albeit very normal, if I had had a mom ask me that, I would have said, thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Do you have any advice? You know, just thank you for acknowledging that my pain and experience is totally normal and okay. And I shouldn't, there's enough to be dealing with as a mother. As a new mother, the stress on top of what you're already dealing with is something that can be addressed and really taken away with the right resources and the appropriate conversations.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I'm so excited that you're talking about this and that you took time to do this today. I know that you had other things going on, so I appreciate it. And I'm just like, to me as a new parent and also someone who was postpartum 16 months ago now, it's like you kind of black out a lot of it, but then also you remember some of it when you have conversations like this. And so I think it's just like all this information and support is so important and so needed. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to talk to me, and also just that you're doing this with Bodily, because it's just so important and needed right now.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much for continuing in your efforts to talk about all of this and bring transparency to a cause that, not even a cause, bring transparency to a huge part of our culture that we don't address. So thank you for bringing me on here. It's so great to see you again. And I just really appreciate your time.
Thank you. And we'll put all the information in the comment section for all the work that you're doing with Bodily, because I love it. So
thank you. Thank you. It's good to see you.
You too. Bye.
Happy holidays.